Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us and welcome to the Product in LA podcast. I'm your host, Ethan Cole, and this is an opportunity to shine the spotlight on some of the exceptional technology leaders we have as part of the LA community in an unedited, one take, organic conversation. With us today is Thor Clark. Super excited to have you here, Thor.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Oh,
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, this is gonna be fun. Thank you for coming to the studio. But first, a word from our sponsors. Product in LA is brought to you by Uruit. Do you need help completing your roadmap items? Uruit is a digital product development agency with over 15 years of experience helping companies build web and mobile apps by embedding directly into their Scrum teams. Uruit's expert full-stack software developers provide quality code to help you get the job done. If you need React or Angular front-end devs, or perhaps help with Node.js, .NET, or Python development, DevOps, or even product or design to help solidify requirements, they're ready to help you close out roadmap items and actually release to customers. Learn more at uruit.com. That's URUIT.com. We're also brought to you by the Product Managers Association Los Angeles, available at pma.la. They're the largest professional organization for product and designers in LA with more than 3,000 members from over 500 companies. They host monthly meetups, organize the Product Leader Console, where CPOs and heads of product connect in small 6 to 8 member pods, and have a mentorship program where they connect working product managers with students from underrepresented groups to help build a better, more diverse next gen. To learn more about PMA, go to pma.la. To learn more about the mentorship program, go to pma.la/mentorship. Our guest today is Thor Clark. He's the founder of Revity. He's also in past roles been the CTO of Well Health, CTO of Tiger Connect. He was co-founder of and CTO at Sign Now that was acquired by Barracuda. And he was CTO of Invest Tools that was acquired by TD Ameritrade. And one interesting fact you might find by looking at his LinkedIn page is he's a Techstars mentor. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what it's like mentoring for those teams?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. And Well Health actually came through the Techstars program.
Oh, really?
So we had a connection there with Matt Kozloff, who runs the program now, in affiliation with Cedar Sinai for the healthcare program there at Techstars.
That's great. That's a really good connection.
Yeah. And Matt's a great guy, runs a great program. So I mentored two cohorts last year, and it was fun. Super interesting in terms of the people that they have that come through that program. Okay. And the companies they've generally got a little bit of revenue, but they're really trying to still figure out their product market fit. Okay. Super dynamic. The best thing about it for me has just been the ability to keep in touch with some of the companies after I've gone through the mentoring program with them and see them really succeed and grow. One of those is Pear Health in the social determinants of health space. Great CEO and CTO, and have really just progressed by leaps and bounds since the program.
That's awesome. I imagine really your experience, having had a couple of exits and built things from the ground up, that probably comes in handy. They probably appreciate your time.
Yeah, I think so. Often all we can do as mentors is really just be a sounding board, frankly, because we're not doing any of the work. We're not really making any of the decisions. Right. But I do think there is a lot of value in having gone through the process a couple of times and just having that perspective and being able to share that with the founders, and a couple connections here and there is always useful as well.
Did you get that when you're coming up? Is it partially like, oh man, I wish we had this program when I was, founding my first company?
Oh, 100%. I think particularly, I particularly feel it with the CTOs in those groups. Okay. Because, my first couple of rounds, I was really just kind of figuring it out on the fly.
Right.
And, occasionally you meet someone that's somewhat helpful, but having a structured program like this where you can kind of come in and have some deep conversations and really kind of help people navigate processes and experiences that you've been through before, hopefully is helpful. I certainly would have found it helpful early in my career.
Oh, that's fun. And thank you for giving back like you do. That's kind of incredible, especially in this community here. I'd love to kind of go to the beginning, so you've been CTO, you've been founder, especially in technologies that didn't exist, right? So how did you find your way here? Did you think that you'd end up in the medical field, or do you think you end up in health tech, but that wasn't even a thing back then?
Yeah, it's a good question. I I've been a technologist my entire career. So
Okay.
I was writing code since I was 12.
Since you were 12.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wrote I don't know if you ever ran across the life simulation, very kind of old school
Like
geeky
Sim
kind of thing.
City or
No, it's a very simple kind of cellular automation program that uses a couple of very simple rules to create very complex patterns. In
okay.
any case, I remember I saw it at the Exploratorium just when I was a kid up in San Francisco,
Okay.
and wrote it in assembly language on an old TRS-80 computer, and that was kind of my first introduction to programming, and I've just loved computers ever since.
At age 12?
Yes,
Wow.
and so I've always been really interested in technology, and did a little bit of machine learning as an undergrad, and so kind of got my hands in that a little bit, and got into financial services,
Okay.
and then ad tech,
That's right.
and have done a little bit with e-signature and online transactions. Healthcare was never really on my radar, to be totally transparent about
Yeah.
it. My mother was a doctor, and so I always did have that exposure to a little bit of healthcare. But towards the end of my time at Barracuda, I was really kind of looking for what's next.
Okay.
I'd gone through my, put in my commitment at Barracuda, and was kind of excited to get back into the startup world.
Right.
And had this opportunity with Tiger Connect, and I was excited to get into healthcare. I thought, having kind of invested a lot of time in really building my management and technical expertise, I was interested in getting into something where I'd have an impact on people. And I think by that time, I'd had a couple of kids, and it's some little more exposure to the healthcare system. I think a lot of people in their relative youth go through their lives without really getting much exposure to the healthcare system at all.
Right.
Really, apart from maybe a physical on occasion. But once you start to get a little older, you see maybe your parents start to go through, some more significant interactions with the healthcare system, or you start to have kids, and in one way or another, there's often a significant healthcare component there.
I thought you were going to go like the root of like your priorities change when you have kids, but it's partially that, but it sounds like it's very much your relationship with healthcare changes in general. Like generally speaking, if you're healthy in your youth, yeah, you don't really think too much about the healthcare system. You got to go to a doctor. You need to have health insurance, but for the most part, it's kind of something that's not part of your daily life. And as you grow up, it's kind of a bang bang. It's like child care and elder care, and all of a sudden you're impacted by the system you never knew really existed.
Well said. Well said. And I gained a deeper appreciation, I think, for the impact and the value of those services. And frankly, having a little bit more exposure to it really exposed for me the technical challenges and the administrative challenges and the workflow challenges, just as you kind of go through the system as a patient or as a caregiver. You could really see the inefficiencies and the challenges that the nurses and the doctors are dealing with, as well as your experience as a patient, which is frustrating in so many ways, even today.
I still can't believe we haven't figured out that the paper form with the clipboard and the pen they gave you every single time for like 10 years before I was even into tech as much as I am now. Like it's like, cause there's gotta be a better way. How are we still doing this? How is there not just like one digital thing that goes one place? I'm sure you have answers to that.
Well,
it's actually probably more complex than you.
It's interesting. It's just, I think, because healthcare is so huge, I think 20% of the US GDP, something like that. So it's a very significant
US
portion.
Healthcare is 20% of US GDP.
Something like that.
Okay.
Don't quote me on that.
Yeah.
But it's very significant, and it's a huge machine. And so, as you can imagine, once you start to peel the onion a little bit and better understand the reasons that a lot of these decisions were made and a lot of these systems are in place, it takes time and investment to unwind those and put in appropriate solutions. And, of course, you have to think about privacy and the regulatory environment and the existing infrastructure that is not going to disappear.
Right.
So it is complicated, but for me, I felt like it was a worthwhile use of my abilities, and an interesting area to focus on.
Did you see a lot of crossover between, financial investment and the healthcare industry? Like, was there for you, was like a very steep learning curve, or when you got into it, we're like, oh, this actually feels pretty similar to what I've been doing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I some things were very different and some things were very similar.
Okay.
So for me, I think luckily, although my career has been kind of varied in terms of the industries, it's always been SaaS, always been enterprise SaaS, selling into
software as a service.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Selling into relatively large enterprises and generally in highly regulated environments.
Okay.
So financial services, e-signature, electronic transactions, ad tech, yes and no, but there's still a significant regulatory component there around personal information. So that was very natural for me in terms of understanding how to build, maintain, develop platforms that met a variety of regulatory requirements. The acronyms are a little different,
right?
But ultimately it's quite similar from a process perspective. The systems and the data is very different.
Okay.
And in part, and I never forget, I was at my first HIMSS. HIMSS is one of the major healthcare conferences, and the first one I'd ever been to, I was, I think, 3 weeks into my stint, my first healthcare,
like a sea full of strangers. Yeah.
Yes.
You know your industry, and all of a sudden you go to a brand new and you know anyone.
Yeah. And I was at a seminar, and they had someone up there. I'll try and remember his name, but very smart guy. And his take on healthcare data was so interesting because in almost every other, well, not almost every other, but the endeavors that I had been a part of, financial services, ad tech, things like that, the data was really defined and generated by humans and fully controlled by humans.
Okay.
And that we've decided what a stock market is. We've decided what a stock price is. We've decided all this information and agreed that's how we're going to navigate this system that we've built. Whereas healthcare is very different, and that we're really dealing with the human body and input from natural systems, which is relatively unknown still.
Yeah.
When it comes right down to it. And that you might be collecting the right set of data today, and there might be a discovery tomorrow that means, oh, we need to collect new data, and we didn't have that data in the past.
Oh, interesting.
Or there might be data we're collecting today we don't care about anymore, or data that we have been collecting but without enough precision to be really useful. And that makes the system much more complicated because it's constantly changing out from under your feet. It's not really a static system, and there isn't a governing body that gets together once a year and says, well, now we're going to change things.
Right.
It's really just this huge human effort to better understand the human body and the human mind, frankly, when it comes to behavioral health issues. And as a technologist, you want to support that, but the domain is different. It's not as simple or as predictable as financial services.
I was gonna say, do you feel like it's more reactionary? You have to react to these changes, or you have to react to like some new disease that comes up and all of a sudden it throws out the window everything you thought you knew?
Well, I think so. I mean, I'll give COVID as a great example. Yeah. Frankly, like so I lived through that at Well Health, and we transitioned from fast growing. We're probably doubling, year over year at the time. Just rolling out patient communication, patient engagement solutions.
Do a quick description of what Well Health is.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So Well Health manages the last mile of patient communication outside of the office.
Okay.
So everything that every interaction that a patient might have with a healthcare system outside the office, can go through Well Health. So billing, appointment reminders, questions. My kid has a rash. What should I do about it? Should I come in? All of those types of things. So essentially replacing the phone and apps with messaging solutions.
Okay. During COVID, I imagine there are a lot of questions being asked.
Well, it was a huge a huge change for us, because all of a sudden some of the things we had been working on mattered much, much less than than they'd used to.
Right.
And then some things mattered much, much more. So we, for example, rolled out a virtual waiting room solution so that you could go to your visit. If you had to do an in-person visit, you go to visit, but you could wait in your car.
Right.
And then the front office, so rather than the front office calling people from the waiting room, the front office just push a button and say, oh, Jane Smith is, ready to see it, their room is available. And the person would be sitting in their car, get a message and say, okay, great, now I can come in. They'd walk right into their room. So those were the types of solutions that were really became necessary.
Yeah.
Kind of out of the blue. And so it is reactive. I mean, I don't like to think of myself as a reactive person.
No.
But I think that's very true.
But yeah, it's a different world from like finance, where like there could be changes in the economic situation, but I don't think, they're not as drastic as that. For example, and it's funny because I thought about not thinking about COVID, and now again, like in this context, in this lens, I always thought that people were throwing roadmaps out the window, and it sounds like you were, but from a CTO perspective, there had to be some kind of excitement because there's a new challenge, right? Okay, something we never thought of before. Like, okay, there's no waiting rooms. We want people to go in one at a time. They're going directly to the office. We need to have a waiting room from people's cars, and we need to have some new solution. I feel like from the CTO, even though maybe the stimulus for it is reactionary, there's a lot of inventiveness that comes into how do I solve this new problem that arose.
Yes, I would agree with that. I think there were a couple things that were really positive about it. One, from a team perspective, it just really reinforced our mission, because we'd always really thought of ourselves and what we did as ultimately serving patients and providers, and in a way, the opportunity to not just kind of sit at home and stress about things, but to actually get work done that was having a real impact on real patients
at that
and
moment,
helping people. Exactly. It was just we're kind of lucky in a way to have that opportunity to really have an impact and contribute in a meaningful way. And yes, and then of course, technical challenges. I don't think you get into technology unless you love solving problems with other people.
Right.
And, what a problem to solve, right? You've got, your team internally all kind of working together on this. You're integrating closely with at least one other organization, often two or three other organizations to integrate into workflows and get everything actually up and running and working appropriately. And so there's the components that are very fun and I think enjoyable for everyone who's involved.
That's incredible. And you just kind of bringing back these feelings that you kind of forget, I guess, is those first couple weeks and months in COVID when you wanted to be able to do something, right? So at PMA, we did a hackathon with AILA and USC and UCLA, just trying to figure out, hey, what could we do, students and, mentors and advisors to make a difference. It must have been really invigorating to be on your team at that moment, because you're like, okay, guys, like it's our turn. Like we get to actually do something. We can make a difference. The world is literally sitting around hoping they could do something. This is us. This is great.
Yeah. So it was, but yeah, that was a great question. And I think, a lot of what we do is reactive. So I'll give you another example. We, in what we're working on today around diagnosing more effectively, more accurately, kind of out of a doctor's note. And I don't mean clinical decision support, but really kind of extracting what's in the doctor's note and providing the right set of codes that are as accurate and it's correct as possible based on what the doctors put in.
And a code to be like a billing code?
A diagnosis code. So for whatever type of condition it is, could be a broken finger, could be diabetes, could be any number of things.
Yeah, those are two very different things. Well, like the field of what it could be is fantastic. Again, in healthcare, it's not just like, hey, is it a profit or a loss? It's like a broken finger or diabetes or any number of things in between.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so So in the last few years, that's actually transitioned from what they call the ICD-9 codes to the ICD-10 codes. And that's gone from about, if I recall correctly, about 20,000 ICD-9 codes to now 70,000 ICD-10 codes. And really what they've done there is that they just developed more specific diagnoses to more accurately reflect the condition of the patient based on progress in medicine, right? Progress in understanding these conditions at a more detailed level,
right?
As well as progress in understanding where we can kind of have an impact on patients based on their conditions and the level of detail about their conditions we need to be able to make decisions and create care plans and so on for those patients with the data that we have. So that's another example where we're reactive and that we're responding to this much more detailed set of diagnostic codes.
Yeah.
And the benefits of that are we get more data, we get ultimately better patient care.
Right.
The challenge is, if I'm a doctor, I am not going to remember 70,000 or 20,000 codes. And I'm certainly not going to remember, even in a relatively narrow specialty, I might have 200 or 300 codes. Now it's gone to 600 or 1,000 codes. And managing that change is very challenging and ultimately kind of frustrating for a doctor, particularly when it has impacts on patient care and reimbursement and a bunch of other things. So that's what we're kind of focused on today, is that in one of these areas, is helping doctors manage that change that is forced upon them more easily and more effectively.
I just can't help but think that there's a challenge for the accuracy. So, it's a little easier when you only have, 5 things to select from, but then when you have 50, we're scaling it down incredibly, but like if there's 50 things even to select from, how do you make sure you get it right? How do you guys deal with that type of, inaccuracy at the level when you've gone to so many options beyond analysis paralysis? Like you have to pick something, but it's very specific. Like how do you manage, that change management? Imagine part of it's like, hey, training up how to pick, 6,554 from 6,555.
It's ultimately the doctor is the source of truth.
Okay.
That provider,
Good.
that doctor is the source of truth. And so the goal there is to provide an interaction that makes it as easy as possible for the doctor to approve the ultimate decision around that set of diagnostic codes or that particular diagnostic code. So that's about, well, what's in the note, right? Which is the doctor's kind of output. It's their best thinking about the patient. And how does that map to this list of diagnostic codes? Which one seems to be the most likely? And then the interaction with the doctor, which is you present to the doctor this diagnostic code, which is, has clinical terminology in it, but the doctor can certainly understand.
Right.
And then fine tuning that with the doctor. And maybe there's additional information that can go into the note that helps clarify what this very specific code is, or perhaps there's just a different code that is adjacent to the one that the system is looking at. And so it's that kind of back and forth, which helps the doctor finalize that diagnosis, make sure it's correctly documented in the note, and then just move on to the next patient and to that next encounter. And versus this scenario you might see now, which is, well, I've done it as a doctor and I'm going to pass it off to a medical coder. They're going to look at it 3 days later.
Right.
Then maybe they're going to come back to me and say, hey, what did you mean here? Is it this diagnosis or this one? And then as a doctor, I think, okay, well, now I've got to go back and try and refresh my memory around that interaction I had with the patient 3 days ago.
Yeah. How many interactions have I had since that moment?
Yes. So it's really just shrinking that time, making it simpler and easier for the doctor to accomplish that. And frankly, like more accurately, ultimately, because as you can imagine in that kind of scenario, there's a lot of activity that may just not occur when you've got that long time delay. And we see healthcare systems where they actually have notes and encounters that just fall off, never get submitted because they don't hit that time frame that's required to get those claims submitted to whoever the ultimate payer is. So there's a lot of time-based components to that entire process that are challenging.
I think the hope too would be that by fixing some of these inaccuracies or these delays, that it would bring the overall efficiency of the healthcare system into place where maybe it comes back to the end consumer eventually and the price isn't as high.
Yes. Yeah. Improving efficiency in the back office frees up more resources, more time for the care delivery component of it, for the work that the nurses and the doctors are doing and the time that they're able to spend with patients. And then also the communication with the patient and improving that, the timeliness of that communication, the timeliness of that entire process is also beneficial to a patient in terms of understanding what was I diagnosed with, what's my treatment plan, and all the rest of it.
Yeah, and even in the room too. You know, my wife's a labor and delivery nurse, and she tells me about the charting that they have to do, and they have to manually input so much information with, you know, generally 2 patients at a time during a 12-hour shift. It's definitely an area where there could be some technology to help them out and let them focus more on the actual care in the room, which they do. They often stay, you know, past hours to finish up on the charting, but to give those folks a break to focus on the actual task at hand more than the documentation in the back end would be very welcome. I know from that side.
Yes. Well, that's great to hear. Yeah. I love healthcare, frankly. I just feel like there's so much opportunity to have an impact.
Yeah.
And because it's a highly regulated environment, and a very conservative environment, there's still a tremendous opportunity with the right approach, with a conservative approach that utilizes new technology appropriately, to genuinely improve the care that people get and the experience that doctors have and nurses in delivering that care. And
where do you see it going? I love that. So I'm asking a technologist who loves healthcare. Like where do you see that the biggest leaps in the next, call it 5 years?
Well, my hope, just to be blunt about it, is that the biggest leaps come from biosciences.
Okay.
You know, I think better cancer treatments. I think some of the new therapies that are being developed, and I know there's actually quite a few of these startups here in LA in the biosciences, and that seems to be kind of a growing segment coming out of, I guess, UCLA and other universities. So I think some of that immunotherapy work and some of these other approaches is super interesting and compelling. So that's probably the big picture from my perspective, is just better care and better outcomes. I think on technology, I think obviously, you know, we're working with some of these large language models and some other ML approaches and some rules-based things.
Right.
My perception is that the big opportunities in terms of the application of that new technology are going to be back office and administrative. I don't necessarily see a huge opportunity with clinical decision support with these types of AI tools. I do see a huge opportunity from a back office perspective that these new tools have unlocked a couple components of the workflow that prior to this, you had to have a person there. And then when you have a person there, it creates all kinds of inefficiencies and bottlenecks. But once you've removed that need, you can really then automate a full cycle of this administrative work, and then do that, you know, very quickly and optimize it and improve it in a bunch of different ways. Ultimately, with delivering a better experience for doctors and nurses and patients. And so I think there's huge opportunities there. On the clinical decision support side, I'm not so sure. Once you peel the onion on that a little bit, I don't perceive as much value today from the AI tools around actually doing the work of diagnosing patients.
Yeah.
And so, but we'll see. I could certainly be wrong about that.
Yeah, and part of that is too, there's just so many variables that yes, the AI can be trained for it, but there's also who wants to have their life on the line, the decision being made, by a program that is not yet fully vetted. And maybe that's like a 20-year down the line thing. But yeah, to your point, I love this concept that it's really going to be the back end office. It's going to be your life will get better as a patient. It'll be less painful, hopefully fewer forms, and quicker turnaround so that you can get the care you need, and although the paperwork can be handled quickly.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, grounding it in LA, I love that you brought up the bioscience community here, which is strong, and yeah, they're doing some cool things, making, at least some folks are working on, algorithms that help create better drugs and treatments. This is pretty neat. But love to hear your most LA thing. It's the most LA thing that's happened to you. Is it doesn't have to be tech related. It could be. Love to hear it.
Well, the most LA thing. I guess one thing that comes to mind, I was at Yahoo number of years ago when I was in the ad tech space, and we had gone out just with some coworkers to one of these hotels on the Santa Monica beach. It might have been Shutters. I forget which one, which hotel it was. And we had gone out. There's a pool. There were private cabanas, that type of thing. And one of the women that was in our group was very, very professional person, very straight-laced, very, put together.
Right.
And Vince Vaughn had one of the cabanas, and she just lost it. Tried to get over there, got stopped by the guard. Was
just broke character.
Just was. I saw an entirely different side of someone that evening.
That's awesome.
That was a fun LA experience.
Yeah, Vince Vaughn poolside.
Yeah. Breaking
character of a coworker. That's terrific. We will take that. He was. Still is a very strong movie star, and back in the the Yahoo days, it was probably him near his peak.
Yes, it was. It was.
That's terrific.
Yeah.
So I'm just thinking, like, Vince Vaughn and Swingers, part of the reason I wanted to come out here.
No kidding.
Character, yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Love that movie growing up, and part of LA is ingrained in that. And I think the Dresden Room is still there. And at least a couple of years ago, pre-COVID, that couple who plays in the bar is like Rick and Marty and Diane or something.
Okay.
They were still playing.
Okay.
So if they're still around, go check them out.
I will. That's a great pointer.
Well, I want to thank you again, Thor, for joining us. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge on technology and healthcare and finance. This was a great one. Really appreciate this conversation.
Well, thank you. I love to talk about this stuff, so I appreciate the opportunity, and I really enjoed this.
Oh, it's great. There's a big smile on his face, so you can't see it because it's just audio only. But this is great. Thank you so much, Thor.
All right.
I'd like to thank our sponsors again. It's Product Manager Association Los Angeles at pma.la, and Uruit, available at uruit.com. I'd like to thank you all for listening to us once again, and we'll catch you next time on Product in LA.